Testing. There we go. Same as usual, just another late night Q&A stream. Uber's popping at this hour, so I'm probably gonna be skipping off to go do rides and shit here and there. But I was picking up two girls, and some guys came to the same hotel as them. And the girls convinced the guys to hop in the car, and the guys weren't with them originally, so they're like, "Oh, how much?" And I was like, "Yo, like $5-10, and I'll drive you to the place." And they're like, "Yo, no, you have to charge them more than that. You have to charge them like $20, and like charge them 20, not like $5-10." And so they got in. And then once he got there, he asked me again how much, and I said, "Yeah, just $5-10." And they're like, "No, charge them 20." And then the guy gave me a $20 bill for a fucking $3 fare, $3.50 fare. So I was just like, "Yo, fuck it out, cool." Dang. So I just made big money in a $3.50 fare trip. Pretty good trip. Basically, just made $23 in 15 minutes. Or 10 minutes. About. Yeah, it's 10 minutes. Pretty good shit. Hmm.
This business about the thorn and the Paul. We have before us the case of Androcles and the lion. The thorn in the paw is far from the worst answer, but it was enough. Still, at that it was too much. And a slave, sir, was the one who showed compassion. There is the flesh with all its fault, and far from perfect, yet the flesh remembers. The flesh does not forget. And the flesh was noble enough to deny its own misery in the game, to set aside the jabbings, the hunger, and spare that compassionate slave, Androcles. The slave and the beast are one. Anton is not. Anton is overfed and disconnected. He has wrapped himself in pretty thoughts and takes that for reality. Let us place Anton in the game. The troops need diversion. They perish from boredom. He is no citizen. Let him enter as bestiary, the lowest of class. Let him have his spear. We are not unsporting. But let him face Androcles' lion. If the fat fool of philosopher has ever shown compassion, he has nothing to fear from pretty kicking. And if he is the boorish, self-centered, callous, self-serving shit we suspect him to be, well, those with eyes and ears shall be instructed at how cat plays.
I'm not really sure why Gary is so upset or so angry. He just seems so irritated or frustrated.
Most of the world is irritated and frustrated. Through all of human history, there's been a ton of irritation and frustration. I think I make it really clear in my videos. You see the focus of the argument. This God delusion is a troublesome thing. In my opinion, it destroys human progress. I should be unemotional about that, and I should lack passion. You know, you people talk about narratives and the stories we tell ourselves and the world we live in based on that narrative. My narrative is very different than yours. Animals suffer. Human beings do an awful lot of suffering. It's all pointless and useless suffering because we don't build anything good out of it. We don't do it for some good purpose. Lots of wasted suffering. We get angry and then kill each other. If I have a cat and the cat is dying or suffering, and it horrifies me, it bothers me, it causes me much stress and grief. Logically, I have to recognize that every other cat that's suffering is just as meaningful, just as real, just as care about a bull. And that's the key thing. So once I recognize that, then yeah, my narrative starts getting a little dark. It's a little disturbing, a little scary, a little horrifying. And when I see people who are basically advocating this don't worry, be happy thing, pretend that we're on some magical ride and we're going somewhere, yeah, it bothers me. When you add up all the evidence, this is where it points. And we have more than enough evidence to convict on this crime. We got it from the DNA evidence. We've got the circumstantial evidence. All kinds of evidence that all point to the reality that this doesn't have anything to do with purpose and intention and something's will or any of that crap. It has to do with what happens when matter acquires the capacity to reproduce itself. And it evolves for 4 billion years. I'm saying that there is this value. We know that suffering is a negative. I'm conversing on the subject of what it's worth, but we know it's got red on it. We know it's not a good thing. It really can be established as a premise, as a fact. There's this thing called suffering, unpleasantness, repulsive sensation, pain that has a real negative component. What it's worth is what I'm arguing. It has no value unless it has something really powerfully valuable to compensate for it. The question is there anything powerfully valuable to compensate for it, to justify it?
What you've done is you've moved from their own objectivity into their own value.
You know, from your point of view, there's no such thing as value in the universe. No, there's a huge distinction between a sentient organism and a rock. There's a gigantic difference. It's not the same thing. When the universe is all done and you subtotaled, it would be a significant thing. Those little things that we're feeling and sentient, that would be distinguished. It would be distinguishable from the rocks and the minerals and the suns and the galaxies and all the other hardware out there. Those little feeling things were fucking important. They had a capacity that the other shit didn't have, and an important capacity. The truth is the truth, assholes. It's not a good enough response to say, oh, the truth is too depressing. You know how lame that argument is? Make the argument that the truth isn't depressing, or deal with the depressing fact that the truth is depressing, but don't blame me for it.
Ophelia? Touch Ophelia. Yes, good boy. What's this called? Rock. What's this called? Rock. What's this called? What color is this? What's that made of? What's this made of? Glass. What's this called? Glass. What's this called? What's this called? What? What's this called? Sock. What color? Gray. What's this called? It's made of glass. What's it called? What's this called? Yes, it's a bowl. Good boy. You can't resist banging on the bowl. What's this book made of? What's this called? Sock. What's this made of? What's it made of? What's this called? What's it made of? Glass. No. What's the bowl made of? That's right. Good job. Here's your pistachio. And
Where's the names on Jeffrey Epstein's list? Why don't we have them yet? That's all. That's all. Go back on. Carry on with what you're doing. Just want to remind you that we don't have Jeffrey Epstein's list yet. And we need that shit. We need to beat him.
three reasons why.
E. Wow. A Cinnamonder.
Congratulations.
Ubunga, ubunga, down here, unga.
And this video is satisfaction we find in it when it comes. But the brute
its enjoyment is not anticipated and therefore suffers no deduction, so that the actual pleasure of the moment comes to it whole and unimpaired. In the same way, too, evil presses upon the brute only with its own intrinsic weight, whereas with us, the fear of it coming often makes its burden 10 times more grievous. It is just this characteristic way in which
You have an obligation, if you're going to impose, to get consent, not to recklessly be stepping in other people's wet cement. Making babies, you're rolling risk dice, and they have skull and crossbone right on them. You can look at the face of the dice and see it's right on the dice. They arrogantly just say, I don't care. I don't like skeletons, so they won't show up when I roll the dice, because I have superpowers. Or some bullshit rationalization says it's okay for me to roll 2 skull heads, fuck somebody over, create a bad destiny with my decision to roll dice that didn't need to be rolled. What was your ambition? What's your expectation? Your expectation was to assign a risk, and you just couldn't give a shit. That's it. You're selfish, you suck, you're unenlightened, you're some asshole who would go into the universe and make hamburgers out of things because it suits you, it suits your desire. You hungry, you take. And that's all you're doing with this pro-life crap. You're just saying, I'll take. Impose the risk, the pain and the suffering on certain individuals. Fuck them. They don't have any say in the matter. Fuck you. It's just so overt an imposition. A rude, obnoxious, arrogant imposition. And for what? No God is telling you you have to do it. Just own up to the fact that you believe in God and say, God made me do it. God says I have to. God says it's our obligation. Quit playing this game that you did something for some rational reason. You did nothing for a rational reason. Just selfish, self-interested, and reasons in a brain that was a glib, reckless asshole. Properly define who you are, what you've done with your existence. Quit pretending that you did some search for the truth. You aren't searching for the truth. You're searching for rationalizations that make your deluded, silly Barney the Dinosaur philosophy validated. And that's it. You're looking to validate your horseshit with any kind of string of bullshit that isn't evidence. You can pull on it, you can make it look like it. It doesn't change what it is. Shitty rationalizations, horseshit that you just made up. For anybody who is enlightened, has any kind of intelligence, it's a decisive argument. So you can't argue it. There's no counter argument for the fact that you have an obligation, if you're going to impose, to get consent. It's just basic to existing, is trying to have a unmessy footprint, not to recklessly be stepping in other people's wet cement. This is a complex argument? No, it's so simple an argument. Logic and reasoning will win in the end. But to get to the end, to advance logically through the steps of understanding, enlightenment is understanding we're just addicts. And so if you don't make the addict, then there's none of this concern over the heroin anymore. It's irrelevant. Even if we were to live perfect lives, that would mean we make a mess and we perfectly clean it up. But there's still a mess for a while, which is still a negative.
Fucking hate everybody in this split ear.
I'm an ethicist, an extinctionist. What evidence is there that sensation has something to do with intelligence? I mean, high intelligence. No evidence that sensation cares about how intelligent you are. Capacity to feel was something that happened a long time ago in evolutionary history. And the fact is that doing our thinking thing might make us less sensitive. We might have dulled our senses to be able to do this vocabulary thing and to compose sentences and communicate with language. We might be a lot duller as a sensual organism than the rest of the little beasties running around. There's no evidence otherwise, in my opinion. There's no evidence of any correlation between depth or intensity of sensation and being able to do algebra. Zero. I think everything should, as soon as possible and as gracefully as possible, go extinct, because there's no form of life that is
reasonably efficient. It's all unreasonably too expensive for the nonsense that it is, which is build a hill, fall down the hill, build a hill, fall down a hill. Make a need that doesn't need to exist so you can satisfy it in some silly way. Make a whip so you can create a shield against the whip. Stop making shit, and then you don't have to clean it up. Not complicated. Really isn't complicated. The statistical truth of the world as it is that the more intelligent somebody is, the less likely they are to have kids. Most people, right now, aren't having kids sufficient to maintain human existence. Most people, 80%. And it's only a small percentage of the human race that's creating all of the growth in population. It's just a matter of getting the 80% or some percentage of the 80% to acknowledge and a responsibility to stop the 20% from acting irresponsibly. You don't want them raising the next generation anyway. You don't want the next generation of the human race to be raised in ignorance and squalor. It's stupid. You don't even have to be an anti-natalist to recognize this is a train wreck. I mean, you're just asking for idiocracy, making desire, creating it where it doesn't exist, making the hungry thing so you can feed it gruel. You can't make that reasonable. The thorn has to go in before you can feel the pleasure of its removal. And that's what your maturation is a bunch of thorns going in. And some of those thorns you're never going to remove. You'll only get a glimmer of what it's like not to have them. That's how the game works. It's not a positive game, it's a negative game. I'm not going to apologize for my passion. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Fuck that. I think it should bother you, frankly. I think if your brain is working properly, you should be bothered. Pretty dismal job to spend every day arguing about suffering. It's kind of painful to think about how bad things are. I think I've done my part, especially me, an old fan. I've just lost all capacity, all patience with trideisms. I just have no capacity to have a trivial conversation about anything, or a soft one, or a gentle one. I can't write to people who need to be placated and patronized and fondled, into accepting reality. And I suppose that's some of what's required here. And I don't think Old Fan's any good at that either, actually. She's bold and aggressive. It's difficult to compose the argument in a sterile manner without passion. It's a subject worthy of passion. So there's lots of reasons why I'm just not the best person for attempting to compose the seductive argument for annihilation. It's a difficult argument because it just is so repugnant to people's senses. It just has to do with taking being an atheist seriously and fairly looking at what evolution is, which is baby killing, the murder of most of the organisms on Earth before they even reach maturation. So there's the 5-minute argument, and then there's the 3-hour argument. But the logic's kind of just clear. If you take the truth of a cold universe seriously, a universe that isn't thoughtful and clever and sensible, reasonable, or any of that stuff, doesn't have any capacity to know the difference, is dumber than the dumb animals we kind of mock. Our responsibility as the intelligence on Earth, the intelligence in the universe, perhaps the only one, we have a huge responsibility. All the pain that happens on Earth is our fault. We make it possible by letting it alone, by condoning it passively or overtly. It's our fault now. It's just the truth. You can't just blame the universe, the system, because we can stop it. And that's the truth. I guess that's one of the arguments that has to be made, is just the argument of accountability. What are we voting for? Slaughterhouse or no slaughterhouse. Meat grinder or no meat grinder. This is all it takes. Yes or no. That's the only effort they have to expend.
We want the right to not exist. We want the right to say no. To be no individual. To be no animal. To be no nationality. To be no gender. To be no winner. To be no loser. To be no reproducer. To be no consumer. To be no cannibal. To be no addict. The right to be in no life, no domain, no kingdom, no phylum, no class, no order, no genus, no species. The right to say no to all of it.
Could rewrite the selfish gene and just call it the homicidal serial killer gene, because that's really what it is. Throws baby birds out of the nest, picks them up and tosses them out to get eaten on the ground. So it's a kind of insidious murder all over the place. I set you up to catch fire, and then I cook a marshmallow on your cinders. We are living in this horrible meat grinder of a system, consuming preposterous amounts of suffering to feather our nest, so to speak, our bed that we're lying in of we're great. Our we're great bed is made out of a biosphere that suffers a lot so we can breathe. Evolution is a crude, dumb force that squanders suffering in preposterous volumes. It doesn't care about your suffering. It doesn't understand your suffering. It can't pay attention to it because it can't even recognize it. It mass murders children in horrible, disgusting, torturous ways. And you're saying it's oh fucking K. That makes you just as bad. It makes you worse. Nature doesn't have the sense to know better. We do have the sense to say, I'm not going to be part of Freddy's nightmare. I'm not going to feed Freddy. I'm not going to do anything to help him murder and torture. It doesn't care how much torture it makes. It only cares about creating winners and lots of losers. These people saying, we know what we're doing by having babies. What we're talking about is torture, imposed torture, some notion in your head. It will all be okay. Even if they're tortured, it will be okay somehow, because yin yang or something. A black swan will kiss all of the torture away. Stopping brains from experiencing torment, extreme, horrible anguish and suffering is a good thing. So any place you can stop something from suffering, stop it from being harmed more, it's good to do that. That's plus for your behavior, plus. We're just talking about the coinage, the value. The origin of the value is in the conscious experience. And it's a good thing to prevent a pain that doesn't need to exist. The truth is, this sausage making is ugly as fuck. So we're born into the world in need, with holes, with deprivations, with absences, trying to fill the fucking empty spots. That's all we do. And if we did it perfectly, in the end, we just win being unnegative. We don't actually make positives. We just clean up the negatives. That's all we're doing here. So there is no real victory. Climbing out of quicksand that you should have never been in the first place. We exist at the expense of the entire biosphere. The biosphere creating pure water, clean air, and all that stuff. There's a whole biosphere creating what we're living on. And it's being tormented. Huge attrition that exists in nature. The 8 little lion cubs are being torn to pieces alive. 30,000 sea turtles, 20,000 octopuses being tortured.